Hello, and welcome to Bonhill Geography. In today's video, we'll explore how food choices affect people, the economy, and the environment. We'll focus on three separate areas, including the demand for high-value food exports and seasonal produce, the environmental impact of food miles, and the move towards local food sourcing. We'll also touch on the rise of agribusiness in the UK. In the past few decades, there's been a growing demand in the UK for exotic, high-value foods like avocados, green beans, and mangoes. Now, these are often imported from low-income countries like Kenya, Ghana, and Peru. At the same time, the UK consumers want seasonal foods like strawberries and asparagus all year round, even when they're out of season locally, and this creates a few problems. But this demand can also create opportunities for farmers in low-income countries. The advantages include job creation, increased income, and improved infrastructure in rural areas. So exporting these high-value crops can significantly boost the low-income economies. However, it's important to bear in mind that the prices of these fruits can massively fluctuate unless they are with something like a fair trade scheme. However, as previously mentioned, this can also create disadvantages for both sides. Farmers might prioritise the export crops over food for local communities. That could lead to food insecurity, so they don't have enough to meet demand. The working conditions could be quite poor, and the environmental cost of travelling and transporting food long distances is often quite high due to air freight and packing waste. We call that food miles, the distance that food has travelled. Now, there has also been a rise in interest in organic and seasonal produce within the UK itself. Consumers are becoming more aware of the health and sustainability, leading to increased demand for food grown without synthetic chemicals and harvested in its own natural seasons. Now, we touched on this idea earlier. Food miles refer to the distance that food travels from where it's grown to where it's eaten. The further the food travels, the more carbon emissions are produced, which contribute towards climate change. For example, importing asparagus from Peru or grapes from South Africa adds significantly to the UK's carbon footprint. Now, as previously mentioned, to reduce this impact, many people are turning to locally sourced food. That includes buying from farmers markets, subscribing to veg box schemes, or supporting community farming. Local sourcing has several advantages, like reducing these emissions from food miles. It's going to help to support the local economy, and it often results in even fresher produce. However, with locally sourced food, there's also some drawbacks. It is usually more expensive as it's not being grown in LIC countries, so the labour cost is higher, and it's also not going to be available all year round. The UK climate also significantly limits the variety of crops that can be grown, especially in the winter, meaning it's difficult to meet consumer demand without importing food. A really good example of this is literally when I was shopping the other day. I was looking at broccoli, which always comes from, in my opinion, as my mind thinks of it, in the UK. However, the broccoli that I was buying for £1 was coming again from Peru, which is mental. Broccoli. Now, we've talked about agribusiness before, and this refers to large-scale industrial farming that uses modern technology, machinery, and chemicals to maximise efficiency and output. You could also decide to use the word yield here, where it has a high yield of crops. Now, this trend is typically growing in the UK, because farming is becoming more commercial and profit driven. A good example of agribusiness in the UK is in East Anglia, where large farms use GPS guided tractors and automated irrigation to grow crops like wheat and potatoes. As a reminder, irrigation is when water your crops by diverting water from nearby rivers and lakes, so there's less need for sprinklers, for example. Now, the advantages of agribusiness include higher food production, lower prices for consumers, and more efficient use of land and labour, meaning it's going to meet the demands of a growing population and support the UK's food security, basically meaning we can make more food over a smaller space of land. However, as with everything, there are significant disadvantages. Agribusiness often leads to the loss of biodiversity, the removal of hedgerows, and the overuse of fertilisers and pesticides. It can also put small family farms out of business, reducing rural employment and community cohesion, meaning lots of local farmers may have to leave the area, or, worse in my opinion, sell their land to have new homes being built. Now, in contrast to agribusiness, the Riverford organic farmers in Devon offer an alternative model. They grow organic vegetables without synthetic chemicals and deliver them in vegetable boxes across the UK. While it supports sustainability and soil health, it can be significantly more expensive and harder to scale, meaning lots of poorer income families will not be able to access organic food. Here's a summary slide of everything discussed in today's video. Please pause here to improve your notes. Okay, here's 3 examples of 6-mark questions that could come up, but do bear in mind these could also be 4s or even an outline question which is a 2. The first question says, to what extent does agribusiness help to improve food security at expense of the environment? And so we'd go for 2 peel paragraphs, one about how it does help, one about how it affects the environment. Then it says evaluate the effectiveness of 2 food production strategies in the UK, and you could use organic farming, locally sourced produce, or agribusiness. The last question says suggest why organic farming creates both environmental opportunities and economic challenges. And so we'd be looking at the environmental benefits of using no fertilizers or chemicals, and then the economic challenges of essentially it being expensive or expecting to have a lower yield. Now over the next 3 slides I've got some model answers, but please do remember these are just examples for things that you can write. If you're not writing exactly the same as me, then that is absolutely fine, but we should be aiming for 2 peel paragraphs, really looking at the topic of the question for each one of these answers. Thank you for watching Bonhill Geography. I'll catch you in the next video.